The leak hit like a siren at midnight. A grainy backstage recording, just 4 seconds long, but long enough to scorch its way across a divided country. We don't pick judges to uphold the law. We pick them to stay quiet on our side. The voice belonged to Eric LZ, one of Trump's longest-serving legal fixers. He hadn't meant to be overheard, but he had been, and the internet didn't forgive. By breakfast, it had aired 50 times on CNN and another 200 on TikTok, complete with ominous violins and flashing subtitles. By lunch, it had reached the floor of the Senate. By dinner, Americans were gathering outside courthouses with placards that read, "Who owns the court?" and "Judges or loyalists?" And so, the unimaginable became reality. The launch of a live, nationally televised hearing where justices of the Supreme Court would be publicly questioned, not for how they ruled, but for who they had become. It was called the National Forum on Judicial Integrity. But across living rooms and news tickers, it earned a far stickier name, the Justice Reckoning. 4 justices stepped forward: Roberts, Sotomayor, Jackson, Thomas. They didn't arrive in robes. They arrived as citizens. The room was quiet as they entered, not out of reverence, but scrutiny. Then came Trump. He didn't enter like a man under investigation. He entered like a headliner. He waved. He smirked. He straightened his red tie with the satisfaction of someone arriving late on purpose. The air shifted. Some booed. Some stood. Some watched motionless, as if waiting for a punchline that hadn't landed yet. "I'm flattered," he began, voice slow and syrupy. "Really, I am. You drag me in here like I'm the mastermind of some great criminal conspiracy. Me, who gave you peace, jobs, and 3 of the finest judges this country's ever seen. You're welcome." By the way, there was a faint sound of someone scoffing in the crowd. He turned toward the justices. "Let's not kid ourselves. I didn't break the court. I rebuilt it. I gave it spine. I gave it values. I gave it predictability. That used to be a compliment around here." He gestured with a mock flourish toward Thomas. In the empty seat where Barrett would have sat. "Justice Thomas." "My pleasure." "Justice Barrett." "Ah, shame she couldn't make it." "And Roberts?" "Well, you were already there, but I gave you a team. A winning team." The camera panned across the bench. Sotomayor leaned forward. Roberts' jaw twitched slightly. Ketanji Jackson sat still, arms folded, eyes locked. "And what's the crime exactly?" Trump asked, louder now. "That I didn't appoint enough liberals? That I didn't follow the unspoken code of your Harvard Book Club? Come on." The room murmured, half protest, half intrigue. "You cheered when I got indicted for breathing wrong," he said. "Now you're upset because I appointed judges who actually read the Constitution instead of rewriting it with crayons." He turned to Sotomayor with a smirk. "You're going to love this part, Sonia." She didn't blink. "Mr. Trump," she said, voice level, "you're not here because you appointed judges. You're here because the nation believes you appointed obedience. That's a very different thing." Trump chuckled, low and theatrical. "And there it is. Loyalty. A dirty word now from the woman who dissents more often than she breathes." "I'd rather dissent in truth," she replied, "than consent in cowardice." Jackson shifted, leaning forward just enough to signal she was stepping in. "This isn't a rally," she said coldly. "It's not a debate stage. This isn't accounting. We're not here to relive your tenure. We're here to examine what that tenure did to the judiciary and whether the system still recognizes itself in the mirror." Trump clapped once, then again. "Wow, somebody's been reading constitutional fanfiction," he said. "You know, back in the day, judges didn't talk like this. They didn't talk at all." He paused, letting the words hang. "And if I do have control of the court, as you seem so eager to claim, it's only because I made good picks. Smart picks. Legal picks. Confirmed, constitutional, and bulletproof." Then, pivoting toward the cameras. "If that's the scandal, then the real story isn't about me. It's about how easy it was." Silence. Not the stunned kind. The seething kind. It was Sotomayor who rose, unprompted. She didn't look at the moderator. She looked straight at Trump. "You believe you placed justice like pawns on a chessboard," she said. "Then today you'll hear what happens when those pieces decide they're not playing your game." Trump let out a single laugh, quick, clip, dismissive. Oh, please. Do you think I'm scared of a lecture from judges I helped elevate? Let me save you time. I'm still the most powerful man in the room. That's when she said it, quiet, but sharp enough to draw blood. The most powerful man in this room, she replied, is the one who listens. For a moment, everything was still, like a match dangling over gasoline. And in that moment, the hearing changed. It was no longer a panel discussion, no longer a symbolic gesture. It had become something else, a trial, not by jury, not by law, but by memory, by reckoning, by conscience. And the man who once claimed to own the court had just been summoned to hear it speak. For a moment, the room held its breath. Trump hadn't moved. Neither had the justices. It felt less like silence and more like a dare waiting to be taken. Sotomayor took it. She placed a single folder on the desk before her. One case file, worn at the edges, marked in red. Catholic Charities Bureau versus Wisconsin. Her voice cut through the auditorium, not with volume, but with surgical clarity. We begin with a case about identity, she said, and the cost of defining it. A brief pause. Then she continued. In Wisconsin, the Catholic Charities Bureau sought exemption from the state's unemployment insurance program, not to evade law, but to participate in the church's own long-standing internal system, built by their diocese, maintained within religious tradition. She didn't look at Trump. She looked straight ahead, as if addressing the country itself. The state refused, she said, because the charity didn't require its workers to be Catholic, because it didn't proselytize, because its meals came without scripture and its shelter without sermon. There was a murmur in the gallery. Then Trump leaned forward, expression twisted into a half smile, half grimace, equal parts smug and theatrical. Let me get this straight, he said, voice rising with mock incredulity. A Catholic group that doesn't preach, doesn't hire Catholics, doesn't push the word, and you call that religious? He scoffed. Sounds more like a woke NGO with a crucifix taped on. The crowd reacted. Some gasped, others laughed nervously. Ketanji Brown Jackson didn't flinch. She answered with a tone so calm it cut deeper than rage. There's a difference, she said, between sharing faith and coercing it. The law, when it works, respects that difference. Trump smirked. Please, you can't call it religion if nobody's talking about God. What's next? Tax-exempt status for Whole Foods? Jackson leaned in. A man who gives food without demanding belief might be closer to Christ than the man who demands belief before lifting a finger. The room stilled. Sotomayor returned to the record, voice steady. This court ruled unanimously, she said, letting the word linger, that denying the exemption on those grounds violated the First Amendment. 9-0. No dissent. Her gaze finally landed on Trump. That includes the very justices you claim as your trophies. Trump gave a slow, sarcastic nod. Well, even a broken court finds a straight ruling twice a term, he said, though I'm sure someone whispered sweet, secular logic into your ears. He turned to Thomas. Clarence, you remember the good old days, right? When religious meant actual faith, not soup kitchens playing dress-up. Thomas didn't respond. Not yet. But Roberts did. This court didn't weigh religious sincerity, he said. It weighed government neutrality. There is no constitutional clause that says your faith must come with a megaphone. Trump grinned, unbothered. Spoken like a man who's never filled a church, he said. Let's face it, you all bought into this feel-good theology where silence equals righteousness. That's not religion. That's marketing. Sotomayor shot back without pause, then explained why every justice on this bench, including the ones you handpicked, agreed to protect a faith that speaks quietly. Could it be they remembered that the Constitution protects belief, not branding? Trump chuckled. That's cute, really. But don't sell it as some moral triumph. You protected one charity. Meanwhile, your court blocked school prayer, slapped down bakers, handcuffed churches during COVID. Spare me the martyr routine. Jackson's voice cut in, sharp, almost surgical. This case wasn't about prayer or cake. It was about the state deciding that religion only counts if it conforms to one format. Loud, exclusionary, evangelical. She narrowed her eyes. You don't want religion. You want dominance. Trump raised a finger, wagging it. No, sweetheart. I want clarity. I want to know if I give money to a religious cause, I'm not just funding virtue, signaling with incense. A few groans came from the back rows. Thomas finally shifted, adjusting his microphone with a quiet sigh. I supported the ruling, he said, his voice gravel in hesitation, because it forced the state to recognize that faith does not have to shout to be protected. He looked down briefly, then up. And because we've all seen what happens when government starts choosing which gospel counts. Trump opened his mouth, but Roberts cut in. This was a case about restraint, he said. The state overstepped, so we stepped in. That's our job, even when it doesn't suit someone's campaign. Trump grinned, but the edges of that grin were fraying. So, you're saying your precious court finally did something right because I wasn't involved? Sotomayor didn't blink. I'm saying we did something right because your fingerprints weren't on the file. Jackson added, voice cool. Your legacy has been one long attempt to define loyalty as law. But justice doesn't serve loyalty. It serves limits. Trump tilted his head, eyes narrowing. So now you're the gatekeepers of true religion. How very constitutional of you. Sotomayor didn't hesitate. Number the ones who remembered that the Constitution doesn't kneel. Not to loud pastors, not to silent politicians, and certainly not to presidents with God complexes. For the first time, Trump didn't have a line ready. And in that pause, the silence didn't just hold. It rained. For a few moments, Trump said nothing. He rolled his shoulders like a boxer between rounds, still standing, but calculating the next blow. Then he shifted his weight forward and pointed slowly at Justice Clarence Thomas. You, he said with the intimacy of betrayal. You were on the list. My list. I had dinner with your wife. I watched your confirmation with pride. And now you sit here. What? Pretending I'm some aberration? Thomas looked down. His fingers tapped once against the armrest, then stilled. If I'm wrong, Trump continued, voice louder, then so are you. Because if I broke the system, Clarence, then you helped me build it. You stood by while I reshaped the judiciary in my image, and you liked it. Silence, heavy, raw, magnetic. You gave me loyalty once, Trump added, softer now, almost like a threat wrapped in silk. You walk away from me today, you're walking away from everything you defended your whole life. Thomas sat motionless for a beat longer. Then slowly, he leaned into the microphone. His voice wasn't loud, but it filled the room like a cracked bell. I believe that silence preserved the court, he said. But silence became the microphone for power. Trump's expression didn't change, but the shift was real. The audience felt it. He pivoted quickly now, away from Thomas and toward the room itself. Fine, he snapped. Let's say I'm the devil. Let's say I twisted arms and stacked benches. But you, he swept his hand toward the justices, you destroyed trust with robes on. He turned to the audience, finding the cameras. You want to know why America doesn't believe in the courts anymore? Because of them. Because every decision looks like it came from a faculty lounge, not a courtroom. He walked forward a step. You ruled on things no one voted for. You created rights no one asked for. Erased rights people died for. You talk about neutrality like it's sacred scripture, but the only religion you worship is your own influence. Roberts lifted his head. That influence comes from interpreting the law, Mr. Trump, not distorting it to fit a slogan. Trump laughed. You want slogans? Try this. The court is compromised. Or better yet, justice, now with political flavor. He turned to the crowd. These people don't serve America anymore. They serve whatever looks good in a New York Times op-ed. Jackson leaned in. And yet here you are, begging for a stage in the very court you claim has betrayed you. Trump fired back. I'm here because the people deserve the truth. And the truth is this court plays politics just as much as any campaign does. You just wear better suits while doing it. Sotomayor raised an eyebrow. Politics is short-term power. Law is long-term consequence. We don't wear robes for aesthetics. Trump sneered. No, you wear them like armor. So you can't be touched, can't be questioned, can't be held to account. Kings in black. Roberts' voice sharpened. We are questioned every day in appeals in public opinion in the very scrutiny that brought us here. But we answer through our rulings, not through theatrics. Trump's tone rose, animated. Rulings that divided this country like cleavers, immigration, abortion, voting rights. You've sliced through every consensus we ever had. You think you're surgeons? You're butchers. A pause. Then Jackson, quiet but unshaken. If we're butchers, at least we cut toward truth. You just trim the fat off integrity until nothing remains but vanity. The blow landed. Trump stepped back half a pace. Then, recovering, you call it vanity. I call it vision. Thomas finally looked up again, his voice slower now, but firm. A vision that demanded silence, obedience, and loyalty. That's not governance. That's a sermon with a crown. The gallery murmured again. Trump scanned the room, eyes flicking from face to face. You all forget, he said. I didn't appoint you to fight me. I appointed you because I thought you understood the stakes. I thought you wanted to win. Sotomayor stood. We do want to win, just not for you. Ketanji Brown Jackson didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The room had already been carved into silence, its edges sharp with anticipation. She held the printed ruling with the same precision a surgeon holds a scalpel, and just as lethal. She read, "Freedom of religion does not shout. It acts. There is no orthodoxy to faith, only the integrity of service and the choice to serve without coercion." She lowered the paper, then looked up, not at Trump, but through him, as if he were merely a symptom of something larger. Catholic charities didn't preach, she said, but they fed. They clothed. They served. Not for votes, not for power, but because someone had to. That is not silence. That is theology with its sleeves rolled up. Trump scoffed. Sounds like you're endorsing a nonprofit, not judging a case. Jackson blinked, slow and steady. I'm describing a constitutional principle, something you often confuse with a campaign platform. Before he could respond, Thomas leaned forward, his voice low but heavy with resignation. I used to believe loud faith was strong faith, he said. I used to think conviction needed volume. But today I understand. Some truths refuse to shout because they're already rooted too deep to move. Trump narrowed his eyes. What is this? Group therapy for disillusioned robes. Sotomayor stood. Her heels didn't click, they landed. No, she said. This is the sound of the law, remembering its spine. She stepped forward, not grandstanding, not gesturing, but anchoring the moment in steel. You thought you could appoint silence, she said. You thought robes meant loyalty. You misread the garment. It means restraint. It means sacrifice. It means speaking when it's hardest, not when it's safest. Trump bristled. You speak of restraint. Yet here you are, staging a moral inquisition. Sotomayor didn't flinch. This isn't morality. This is jurisprudence. And jurisprudence is what remains when rhetoric burns away. Roberts watched, hands folded. Then he too spoke. Justice isn't a mirror. It doesn't flatter. It reflects the Constitution. And that reflection often disappoints those who crave power more than principle. Trump crossed his arms. Power built this country. Roberts nodded once. Then principle must rebuild it. Ketanji moved closer to the bench, her voice quiet but resonant. You want obedience. You want submission. But this court was not written into the Constitution to obey you. It exists to constrain you. Trump's jaw locked. You act like you've never made a biased ruling. Sotomayor, bias isn't absence. It's denial. And we name it here, out loud, so it can't fester in secret. The air hung heavy. Then Thomas, who had been silent for so much of his career, spoke again. Not with thunder, but with weight. I've served through storms. I've heard arguments that tried to break the very language of law. But I've never seen truth bend. It waits. It always waits until someone finally dares to speak it. Trump said nothing for the first time. No smirk, no counter, just the cold calculation of a man running out of weapons. Sotomayor looked directly at him. You do not control this court. You never did. Because justice wears no bridle. It rides no party. It obeys no king. The camera zoomed in slowly. Trump's face, hollow, not in defeat, but in absence. The crowd stayed quiet, and the truth filled the vacuum. The hearing didn't end with a gavel. It ended with breath held, with eyes locked on a man who'd built an empire on volume, and now had no sound left to give. Trump remained standing, hands curled just enough to hide the tremor. Not fear, not guilt, just the realization that silence in this room spoke louder than slogans. Chief Justice Roberts leaned forward slightly. He didn't declare anything. He didn't have to. This court has issued no verdict today, he said, measured and firm, because some truths, once spoken clearly, do not require one. The chamber didn't erupt. It inhaled. And then, as if on cue, the justices stood, not in unity, but in parallel resolve. They didn't look at each other. They didn't look at Trump. They looked ahead at a country watching. Trump adjusted his tie. A flash of something passed across his face. Maybe confusion, maybe resentment, maybe nothing at all. He turned to the exit, and the camera crews outside scrambled to capture the moment they'd all been waiting for. Trump walking out, not as a defendant, not as a victor, but as a man bypassed by justice made audible. The moment hit the streets before it hit the news. Social media spun out like wildfire. They didn't jail him. They stripped him bare. In truth, he thought silence meant control. Turns out it meant judgment had arrived. Justice spoke. The loudest man had no words left. Late-night shows rewrote their monologues. Political anchors stumbled through live broadcasts, trying to parse an outcome that felt more like a cultural detonation than a legal proceeding. On the steps outside the court, someone had set up a portable speaker. A loop of the phrase, "You don't control this court. Justice wears no bridle," played softly. A teenager, hoodie, backpack, chalk-stained fingers, walked up to the base of the marble wall and wrote in careful strokes. Not all trials need a sentence. Some just need the truth heard aloud. Inside, as the chamber cleared, the justices exchanged no congratulations, no handshakes. They filed out in pairs, each carrying the weight of having spoken not just for the law, but for the silent millions who'd been waiting for power to hear them. Ketanji Brown Jackson removed her glasses and exhaled. Sotomayor passed her quietly. That line, Ketanji said without looking up. Justice doesn't wear a bridle. You wrote that this morning? Sotomayor offered a half-smile. Nope. I've been waiting years to say it. Thomas lingered near the back. Roberts joined him. You think he'll try to spin this? Thomas asked. Roberts shrugged. He'll try, but the tape plays better than his talking points. They stood together in stillness, not needing to say more. Trump entered the hallway alone. No aides, no entourage. Just the steady drone of a nation recalibrating outside. A journalist tried to call out question. He didn't stop. He didn't even acknowledge the voice. He walked past the security line and paused, momentarily unsure if the doors should open inward or outward. They opened for him, but no one waited on the other side. That evening, the country didn't celebrate. It reckoned. Some rallied, some prayed, some cursed, but all remembered. Cable news ran the moment on loop. Trump, frozen mid-step, his expression unreadable. Not broken, but dismantled. One commentator on MSNBC remarked, "Today, the court didn't just reclaim its voice. It reminded America that truth doesn't need permission to speak." Fox News cut to a panel discussion, fractured, tense. Even there, the usual firebrands hesitated. You may not like the format, one said, but when four justices speak with one message, without political choreography, you have to ask who's really out of step. The next morning, a group of law students gathered outside the court. They weren't protesting. They weren't cheering. They stood in silence. One held a sign. You picked judges. The people picked memory. By noon, #Heard Aloud trended globally. And somewhere between the marble columns and the digital cloud of tweets and think pieces, America understood. This wasn't a trial about lawbreaking. It was about truth speaking. It wasn't meant to end in prison. It was meant to end in clarity. And for once it did.